So this is a really excellent resource for everyone who's attending here. This is called The Faces of Human Trafficking, and it's put out by the Office of Victims of Crime. And you can find it online, and you can download each of these. There are several vignettes like this that you can use for training of your staff, as well as training in general and community training, and I certainly recommend it to you. There are a lot of risks that will befall children who are missing from care. The National Center, OJJDP, and the National Council on Juvenile and Family Court Judges have helped us to recognize that they're at risk for physical violence, sexually transmitted infections, HIV, of course, unwanted pregnancies, untreated mental health problems, gang affiliation, sex trafficking, and educational disruption, among other things. So having a plan is really extremely important for children in this particular situation to address each of these risks. They're also at risk for homicide. An erasure homicide is the type of homicide where an individual calls a hotline or the police and says, so-and-so is missing, this child is missing, and I need your help for you to try to help us find this child. We think she ran away, but this person who's making that call has usually been the person who has killed the child and has done away with the child's remains, and that's why it's referred to as an erasure homicide. And there have been many, many reported cases. The one that comes to my mind is the case of Zara Baker, who was a young girl in Hickory, North Carolina, whose stepmother reported her missing, and there was a manhunt for her, and her stepmother had killed her and dismembered her a long time before that time and scattered her remains around North Carolina. So this is another dynamic that we have to think about when you think about kids who are reported as runaways or reported as having been thrown out. In addition to running from, we certainly have children today who are running to. Would you not agree? They are most certainly running to. We have adults who are running to. You know, they'll go on to, one of my patients graduated from high school and went to college, and her mom came back to me and said, I'm really concerned because she's met this guy on a dating site, and the name of the dating site is Tinder. And so, you know, I was sitting in my office thinking, Tinder, oh, how sweet, T-E-N-D-E-R, you know. I was thinking, oh, and I was going to say to the mom, well, you know, at least, she said, no, doctor, it's T-I-N-D-E-R. I was like, what, fire? Oh, no, where is that girl? I need to talk to her. We have to be so mindful of what's going on out there because of mirror-neuron research and its effect upon social development. So mirror-neuron research came to us in 1997 from Italian researchers who were looking at MRI studies while people were looking at something, and they began to notice that vision wasn't just from your eyeball to the back of your brain where the visual center is, but there are all different other sites of your brain that light up when you are looking at something. This is called mirror-neuron research. And mirror-neuron research is very relevant when we talk about what kids see on TV and in the movies and in music videos, because what we know now is that what you see is what you will convince you that you're experiencing what you see. So if you're looking at, let me just use an example of music videos. If you're looking at a really cool music video and everybody's dancing in a strip club in the music video, you know how they have music videos like that. Y'all don't know this, but they do have music videos like that, right? And here you have 11-year-olds and 12-year-old girls, you know, and they're just kind of like, you know, going along with the song. And now they're looking at these women who are dancing on a pole. And then they'll think like, oh, you know, I could do that, you know. And after a minute, you start to look at these things enough, and you're experiencing what you see. And then when you go out of your home and you're going to school, and this guy says, hey, you know, I have a job for you. Do you want to be a dancer? And there's this club down here, the only club out here in the country, you know, that you can come and be a hostess for, or you can be, oh, here's the other term that's frequently used, an entertainer. That's another one of those things. Our girls can then become willing, compliant victims who are running to something that they think is going to give them a better life. And that's one of the other issues that we had not thought about when we began to recognize how prevalent unhealthy sexual messages are. And then there's blackmail like this.
I can't stop thinking about you. I know you've been waiting for this for a while. I wanted to give you something special.
Who are you? Why are you doing this?
I want to say a word a little bit about that. That's called sextortion. And just before I get into LGBTQ youth issues, sextortion is very alive and well. And sextortion can most assuredly lead a youth to leave their home, not because they're running to someone that they think cares for them more, but they're going to meet someone that they feel blackmailed to have to meet. You need to come meet me now, because if you don't, I'm going to post all the pictures that I have of you to everybody in your Facebook page. That's one of the more common forms of blackmail that we see that cause youth to not really run away because they're afraid to be in their home, but they're running to because they're being blackmailed to run to. Ashley Reynolds is a spokesperson in this particular area. She was on the cover of Glamour magazine last summer, and if you get an opportunity, just look her up, Ashley Reynolds, on Google. She was 14 when she had her laptop in her bedroom, and an individual planted spyware on her laptop through her Facebook connections. And what happened was then, when her laptop was off, her laptop was on. And her laptop was on with respect to the camera recording. So when she was undressing and dressing in her bedroom, this individual could watch her and was watching her and videotaping herself nude, getting her clothes on, etc. And then he sent her a text message, not a text message, an email, and said, "I have naked pictures of you." And she was, what are you talking about? You don't have any naked pictures of me. I don't even know who you are. Yes, I do. And he showed her some pictures. And as a 14-year-old, that will just throw you off the edge. And so every night for the next 2 years, he demanded that she make more and more sexually explicit images of herself, and so that he could live stream and capture that. Eventually, her mom saw her just going down so badly and eventually was able to find out what was going on. It was in 2012 that the National Center had started getting so many reports like this that they had to establish that as a new form of report. Sextortion reports. And that is I've read a lot of the communications of these kinds of offenders, and they are so sobering. The blackmail is untenable. The risk for suicide is very high. And if youth run away from their homes because they have to go and meet this person, the chances are very great that they'll never make it back home alive. So this is yet another aspect of what's happening in our running to area that we have to keep in the back of our mind. We have 17,500 youth in foster care who are LGBTQ, it is felt. And LGBTQ youth make up 10% of the runaway population, but 40% of the homeless population. Nearly 7 in 10 report family rejection as the primary reason, as well as abuse for the fact that they had left their home. And many of them did not describe themselves as having run away, but really having been thrown away. So that concept of thrown away youth, when I'm testifying about thrown away youth, or in a case like that, I have to call it what I think it really ought to be called, which is child abandonment. If you throw away a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, you should not expect them to be able to take care of themselves in our society at 12 or 13 years of age, and that would be called child abandonment. If you are a youth of color and you also identify as LGBTQ, you are even in more of a pickle from that perspective. It's been seen that homeless youth of color, the research has shown that they will have many more problems with just the denigration, the degradation, the stereotyping, the stigmatization. And unfortunately, if you are an LGBT youth of color, one of the aspects of your solace, your spiritual well-being is also hindered, because not just in the African American culture, but in many cultures of color, being LGBTQ is considered very sinful and many times unforgivable by families. And so this makes it a lot harder for children to be able to even come to a faith-based program, because they don't necessarily have belief that that program is really there for them. And this is just the way it is. Poverty is a key player in the whole issue of LGBT children who are of color, because urban poverty makes the access to resources even less than we would see in some other cultures, and that's yet another dynamic that we have to see. There are double the rates of sexual abuse before the age of 12 in LGBT youth in general. They experience an average of 7.4 more acts of sexual violence once they are out of the home and are interacting with heterosexual peers, and the attempts at suicide are at a much higher rate as compared to heterosexual homeless youth, when we are looking at what happens to kids when they actually are on the streets. Sometimes LGBTQ youth are running from, and they're running from victimization of bullying, they're running from castigation within their own family and their circles of influence, and they feel very, very unloved in that respect. In one study, 56% of youth who were in foster care at some time, felt that they were safer on the streets than they were in their group or their foster care home. I had a young girl who was rescued from sex trafficking, and our law enforcement and child welfare folks, in the spirit of trying to keep her safe, put her in a very rural group home, not in our county, very rural group home. And I saw her for her medical care for the first time, and I said, "Tell me how you're feeling." And she said, I feel really badly. And I said, "Really, why?" She said, "Because at the group home where I am, everybody calls me poor white trash." So when I called the social worker about that, I was really surprised at how nonchalant the social worker was about what I was telling him was happening at that group home. And what I said to him was, if you try to keep this child in this group home, the chances she's going to run away are very high. Because if she's being denigrated every day among all the other kids that are in that group home, why would she stay? Why would she stay? It would not be, I just want you to understand it. And the fact that you don't, as I was talking to the social worker, I started preaching, I said, the fact that you don't have righteous indignation, what's wrong with you? So homeless LGBTQ youth suffer economic hardships as they're aging out of foster care. LGBTQ, let me start with foster care youth. Foster care youth have trouble aging out. Add that to homeless foster care youth have more trouble. LGBT, homeless, foster care youth have even more trouble. It just goes without saying. And this is something that as a nation we are trying to really work on. State by states are beginning to extend their statutes that children can stay in foster care until age 21, but that's not the case in every state. And even if you get to stay in foster care to the age of 21, we still have to work on our foster care settings, don't we? Because of the research by the Casey Foundation that helps us to understand that foster care children who come into families that have biological children come in with far less social capital. And they're, as they say in the South, red-headed stepchildren as compared to the other children who are in that family that are biological children. And a good example is, according to the Casey Foundation, is that biological children can come home from high school and say, "Hey, the football game is going to be tomorrow night, so can I go with all my friends?" And the parent will say, "Sure, no problem." The foster care child who's in that same home says, "The football game is going to be tomorrow night. Can I go with all my friends?" And they'll say, "No, you have to do this, this, and this in order to earn the right to go with your friends to that football game." Do you see the difference in social capital that is well documented by agencies such as the Casey Foundation? And you then can understand the psychological impact for youth and why they would want to leave such an environment. This is a true story.
Ben's just announced on Facebook that he's gay.
What are you saying?
I'm saying I'm not sure.
No, you're not. You're saying your mates gave you a hard time.
No? I don't know.
You've got me. I've always wanted a gay best friend.
Why don't you just give it a bit of time to think about it?
I have.
Well, give it a bit more time.
I found another one for you last night on Gaydar. He's a bit older, but he's fit. You met some people online, you went on a date.
I know. Fag.
Ben, you think you're gay. You're not the first, and you're certainly not going to be the last.
Andy called me a fag, Jess.
Why don't you meet up with this Matthew? He keeps texting you.
Of course I love you. You're my baby boy.
So what's stopping you?
I don't know.
Let me see you then. Tomorrow.
Ben's gonna get laid.
Ben, your mum found some photos, some naked photos that you'd taken of yourself on your laptop and then sent to Matthew.
He's changed. He doesn't want to spend time with us anymore. He told me this morning that we'd ruined his life.
Mum and Dad don't really understand what it's like to be different.
I'll just tell him you're a dirty little slut.
We're here because we need to ask you some questions and take a statement from you regarding the contact that you told us you had had with two people, Scott Wright and Matthew Stockton.
I will be meeting weekly at the family home with Jeff and Ben. As we know, it's very difficult to police websites, and Ben has been deeply manipulated, as well as sexually and emotionally awakened. We're in this for the long haul.
No, he's run off. Call Declan.
Target driving a light blue Mercedes E500. Speed 72 miles per hour.
I thought you might like these. It's awesome.
Target wearing a pink shirt. Boy is wearing a blue and white jacket.
This is now an internal policing issue. I'm sorry to say, but it's no longer any of your business.
Ben is going to be devastated.
I found this replacement, and I think that she's a really good fit. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry.
Sorry. Sorry about what, exactly? Kathy's gone again!
Inciting a child to engage in sexual activity, and sexual activity with a child. That he befriended him and made him feel special, all for the purposes of sexually abusing him.
So this is a documentary, a dramatized documentary of a real case in the UK of a young boy who came out as gay at the age of 14 on Facebook. He just, announced it on Facebook. And everybody who came back to talk to him were adult men. And what ended up happening to him was that he became what is described in our country as a compliant victim, and willingly went to meet these various men who were going to help him transition into what he thought was going to be a healthy gay relationship. In the end, he was sexually assaulted by 26 different men. And at this particular time, he is on to his 8th trial. Each one of these men have been charged with sexual assault. Each one of these men are clearly known, and they were not the dregs of society, as you could see from the guy who had the baseball tickets and the Mercedes that was picking him up from school. So running to in enticement situations, or running to because of your sexual orientation or gender identity struggles, is another aspect of running to that can have very untoward outcomes in the long run. We can't forget our pregnant and parenting teens. OJJDP has estimated that we have 1.6 million homeless and runaway youth under 18, and 6 to 22% of them are pregnant. So this means nearly 400,000 homeless youth that are at risk for pregnancy. And having resources for these particular girls is a task, and it's a challenging task every step of the way. The prevention of pregnant and parenting teens from running away is important. It's very important. And why is it important? Because we have made a big difference in our society from the scourge that we used to have about maybe 10 years ago of what were referred to as trash can babies. Do you remember when we had that problem? Children who were trying to hide their pregnancies and who were so afraid of the consequences, who would then deliver in a bathroom at a restaurant or something and try to dispose of the child. So the establishment of safe, stable, and nurturing homes for pregnant youth is what we want to seek. And if we're able to accomplish this, this will make our tasking a lot easier from that perspective. Giving these children the risk for the ability to have self-sufficiency so that the outcomes of their pregnancy will not result in going to a hospital, delivering, and then this teenager walks out of the hospital and leaves the baby unclaimed. And not even expressing that the child is up for adoption necessarily. We know that these are likely to be the case when children appear having had no prenatal care, which is another risk factor for poor fetal outcomes. We know that these children are at risk for trying to drown their sorrows, either by using alcohol or by using drugs during the course of their pregnancy. So we know that these infants are at higher risk for a premature delivery, they're at higher risk for having been exposed to substances during the pregnancy, and therefore will become more of a difficulty for us if we're going to try to seek adoption from these particular babies if we have pregnant teams who choose that outcome. So having the presence of maternal homes to assist pregnant teams is another important thing in our communities that need to be there. If not, what can happen is that our pregnant teens can end up like this pregnant teenager did at this place. This is the Highland Mountain Correctional Center, and it's outside of Anchorage. And it is where I met a trafficking victim who became a teenager who was a trafficking victim who became pregnant as a trafficking victim. And during the course of her pregnancy, of course, the pimp did not allow her to stop doing anything. She still had to continue dancing. She still had to continue making money for him, despite the fact that she was pregnant all the way up until the time of her delivery. What was problematic for her was that she had untreated bipolar disorder. And because she was untreated, she not only delivered a baby that was very small and had poor intrauterine growth because of her poor diet and because she was drinking alcohol, etc., but the mother had committed other types of crimes, what we would call petty crimes, that had her end up in this correctional facility. And it is there that I first met her. And because she had untreated bipolar disorder, she was manic at the time that I met her. And her discussion with me was 3 hours of me taking notes and probably saying 3 sentences and her doing all the talking. Have you ever had patients like that? Clients like that? It was really a wake-up call. The amount of violence that we see that's intergenerational and sometimes is cultural, multicultural, was so profound in our Defending Childhood Task Force meetings around the country in the United States that we recommended to Attorney General Holder that there needed to be a separate Defending Childhood Children Exposed to Violence for American Indian and Alaska Native families, because we went to Albuquerque and for 3 days listened to such gut-wrenching testimony that we just felt we couldn't incorporate it into our final report and give it due justice. And so Attorney General Holder agreed and had a separate task force that spent 1.5 years going to many, many tribal countries, tribal lands in the United States and into Alaska, conducting testimonies and interviews. And there is this document, which you can access online, that was the end results of that particular aspect of their task force. What the document, The Guardian of Truth, which is a document about trafficking and prostitution in Minnesota, in Native American in Minnesota, lets us to know is that Native American women, as compared to women who have been sold in prostitution in 9 other countries, including the United States, had higher victimization in every category. The 2 that you can see on the screen right here are threatened with a weapon. 78% of Native American women had experienced that, as compared to 64% of women around the world, or had been homeless. 98%. Native women who were in prostitution had that experience, as compared to women around the world who were in prostitution who had only experienced homelessness in 75% of cases. I would encourage you to download that document for more information regarding the impact of sex trafficking in our American Indian and Native Alaskan culture. And it's called The Guardian of Truth. Very helpful document. Stability is what we want: self-sufficiency, housing availability, financial stability, successful and engaged parenting and attachment for our pregnant and parenting teenagers. And this doesn't happen just by chance. It has to be something that is actually woven into the fabric of providing support. The maternity group home grants, probably some of you who are here have those types of grants, and they're really present for the purpose of having extended residential shelter and service coordination and transitional living plans. One thing that I really liked about one of the trafficking treatment programs in Minnesota, Breaking Free is the name of that program, is that for those young girls who then aged out of foster care and were trafficked victims and became over 18 years of age, Betnita Carter, who was the director of that program, wisely wrote HUD housing grants so that these women and girls, as they came into rehabilitation services from trafficking victimization, would actually have a home to go to once they got out of that program. It allowed them to therefore begin to get their children back from CPS. It gave them an opportunity to find a safe place to stay to help get treatment from a mental health perspective, as well as vocational rehabilitation for employment. So that's another one of those win-win situations that I really was impressed with respect to what can happen from children who have had unwanted pregnancies and who have all of the psychological and mental health impacts that you see in those particular situations. Outreach should include all of the things that we have spoken about, to include informed health, trauma-informed healthcare systems, and also bringing to play their fathers, these young fathers of teens who are pregnant, because many times they do want to help support their child, but just don't have the wherewithal to really know exactly how to do that. So co-parenting options, when they can occur, are also very beneficial when we're talking about youth in this situation. So I want to bring our conversation to a close by talking about the framework for agency, assets, contribution, and enabling environments when we're talking about the whole issue of positive youth development. The dynamic that we are recommending with respect to engaging youth with their families and communities and governments so that they can be empowered to reach their full potential. And there are a lot of ways in which this can be done. In fact, you can choose one section within your organization and focus only on that in order to try to build strengths and assets for youth and foster healthy relationships for them, and also actually strengthening the environment. I want to also mention that when we think about positive youth development and its role that is played with respect to trying to assist children who are homeless or who have been thrown away youth or who are runaway youth, look at the healthy, productive, and engaged youth as your end game. That's what you would desire. And if you can't ignore mental health services for these youth in any way that you can't ignore keeping them inside a cocoon. You need to get them out so that they have an environmental impact and will feel that they're making a difference without necessarily having to spend a lot of money. Picking up the pieces is the name of the game. And that's what we're here for today. That's what this meeting is about, to be able to help kids with respect to their mental health problems, defining their trauma as something that they can get over, and trying to make sure that we're identifying the different mental health, and not to mention addiction problems that may already be present when we see youth that come into our service delivery organizations. If I were to say that the final note that's relevant to what we've talked about today, it would be that children are running away many times from adversities, many times from systems, especially foster care, that may not be meeting their needs. But also today, children are running to what they think is going to be a better outcome for them, not the least of which is that one individual who has met them online and is seeking to sell them a dream. Please keep in mind that we have to look at every child and their potential, including children who have disabilities, developmental disabilities. The slide that I put up right here is about one of my patients who had a developmental disability. She had an intellectual disability, which is the term that we use now for mental retardation. And when she, at the age of 12, when her parents decided that they wanted her social skills to be better and decided to take her out of special education and put her into a regular classroom, do you think she became a victim of bullying? Most assuredly. The name calling that was so common for her was, "It's the dummy, it's the dummy." And so her parents were really struggling with her behaviors when one day in the Pacific Northwest where they lived, a gentleman knocked on the door of their house and said, "Hi, I am the new youth pastor for a church down the street, and I'm just walking up and down the street inviting families to send their children to our program, our outreach program." And the parents were already wringing their hands because of their stress over what was happening with their daughter, and invited him in. He sat down and drank coffee with them, and he began to visit this home every week to talk to them about their daughter and to meet and befriend their daughter. And the family grew to really trust and like him. 6 weeks into this, what I would refer to as a grooming process, the youth pastor said to the parents, "You know, today there's going to be a youth program at the church, and I think maybe your daughter might like to go. Would it be all right if I could walk her the 4 blocks down the street to the church so she could attend the youth program that they're having today?" And by now the parents, of course, had a great deal of trust in him and said, "Sure, that'll be fine, we'll do that, that'd be great." And he walked away with their daughter, whom they did not see for the next year, because he was a trafficker. And he had groomed the church, and he had groomed the family, and of course he had groomed this child. And when I saw the child, and fortunately I got to see the child because the leading cause of death in sex trafficking is murder. When I saw the child a year and a half later, and I asked her how she was doing, the first thing she said to me is that, "I feel like I'm not happy because you know what? I didn't get to have a baby. Because so many of the other girls that were under the control of this guy had become pregnant during the time that he was selling them." And she felt that the one thing that she wanted in life was to be a mother and to have a baby for him. So when we think about how our work has been cut out for us, our work is to help bring our children into a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. And all of us are going to do this by holding our hands together. And I really want to thank you so much for your attention and staying awake during the course of this morning. Thanks.
One more time, a big round of applause for Dr. Sharon Cooper. Thank you for joining us this morning. We continue to do this work and we continue to be passionate about the connections that we make, and there's just continues to be so much that we need to learn and so much that we need to do. So thank you. Good morning. I'm Lori Jackson, the President and CEO for the National Safe Place Network, proud to be the operator of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center again. So, yeah, thank you. I have a few housekeeping details, and then I will release you to break in the first workshop session. So the app, who's using the app? Yeah, everybody like it? Awesome. So you can do your evaluations on the app. We do have some paper copies if you need those, but as William said earlier, they pay attention. He reads those. Debbie reads those. Everyone reads those. So please do those. We want to make this new and better and different. So we want the good and the bad and the ugly. So make sure that you share that information with us, okay? Also, there is a reception. So want to make sure that you're there. It is, and I'm going to cue and karaoke. So Debbie talked about she's had some barbecue. She's going to have some more, and she's going to bring herself up here and do a little singing. So don't miss it. It's going to be a great time. We look forward to seeing you there. Tomorrow is the candlelight vigil. So in your bags, you all got little candles. So if you can, please go ahead and put those in your windows tomorrow. We really want to bring light to that it's National Runaway Prevention Month and share that information. So you have those. Also, want to share that there is one change to the programming. It's tomorrow. There is going to be a new grantee orientation workshop. It is going to be in the 10:45 session in the Penn Valley Room tomorrow, and we'll write that out at the conference information desk. But if you're a new grantee, you'll want to go to that. There's going to be great information there. It is taking the place of, there was a workshop called Mia Corzone, redefining advocacy when working with Latin youth. That presenter is unable due to a death in her family to be here, so there's been a switch out. So let me know if you have any questions. There are, all of the RHYTAC staff are in the blue shirts this year, so if you have any questions, we also have the red name badges on. Don't hesitate to find us. Have a great conference. Thank you for being here.
lady must have used her sister's phone to mark messages. She did not log her own. So sister opens her phone and opens the computer and in the video. That young lady has made a capture code where she's not done anything to the house. And young man used her phone to record the video of them having that. And they took her phone and sent that video to himself, to her phone. So mom sees it. So I'm coming to her second because I'm in France. And I'm like, Mom, I need to see this in my room. You know, and like, let's take it and turn it over to me. Right? Because there's something about an accident or whatever. Police don't get involved. They search mom. You're a child counselor. I'm not. She used my work phone and I finished it with stuff and I saved it in the frame and would have realized that video was report that we saw it, she was destroyed. They confiscated mom's phone, sister's phone, told her whatever, and realized that it was an accident. Pastor Boy. So with Pastor Boy, come on. No, that's not. Pastor Boy, again, she talked a lot about how but not knowing that mom is going to be right. And Pastor Boy is 17 or 18. Yes. So when mom says, listen, I'll turn that video over to you. And every time Pastor Boy is over. So when I take him together, and we're talking after I walk away from dinner, I'm a little scared about this Pastor Boy experience. I'm going to ask you, if we don't figure out what happens or what's going to do, that leaves you at risk. The runaway man, I'm not sure ever the runaway man she knows that's wrong. I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about 15-year-old that tells me Jesus loves her and has made a video and knows the video her phone is sent to him so that she so you got DHS stuff. Mom is begging like you're saying that's not what she was. They're saying no, when they saw the video, we're having this conversation and they realized the only way that they're is to violate the proper right. They violated the proper right. With the understanding they're not going to prosecute her, they violated the right to get her place. She has been in place for the past she's good. She's good. Mom got a job upstate. Because the brother who was the violator who was in prison and mom moved away, Lord left her here and want to get somebody that's good on his train. You cannot leave and you left. You packed up and like what they said that they will release her without leaving her. So it's like these conversations like, okay, you left her. And you want to get one of your friends to go to court without her, go to custody of her, put her in a frame, to Florida. I don't think it's easy. You know, so when you come to that history of family trauma, that history of all those things, and like, okay, you know, so she's still like, they won't leave her. Yeah, they go home. Mom was in Georgia now. She was in Georgia, first in Florida, and then she moved to Georgia and she got home, and now she's moved somewhere else. She's out staying home with an unstable and then mom has her home. Brother is free to jail. You is free to jail. Okay. And it's just like, okay. Yes, and you know, the thing I want to know Philadelphia, Delaware County, so it would be Delaware County. So we were having a conversation. Mom was with FBI, so they were really FBI. No. I didn't know this guy. So it's not a personal threat. I had nothing to do with that. I'm just networking, working with my language learner.